In this demo, we'll be making a quick and simple click counter. I've got a finished version here, so let me just do a test movie and demonstrate how it works. Very simply, we have a readout window that starts at 0, and we have a plus button and a minus button. So if I click the plus button, it adds 1 to the counter. And it keeps going infinitely. And of course, the minus button goes in the reverse direction. And it will go into the negatives. Okay, so very simple. We click it, it adds here. We click it over here, it subtracts. And there's a readout window, a dynamic text window up here for the readout. So why don't I start a new file here? Actually, before I do that, let's look at the code a bit. I actually have this all inside of a movie clip, just so that it's a single unit. So let's go inside of that movie clip and we'll look at how this was constructed. You can see here on my scene 1 timeline, it's all in one single frame. So let's double click this movie clip now. And inside of that movie clip, I still just have 2 layers, one for the content and one for the code, for the actions. Okay, so let's look at the content quick. I have a couple of very simple round buttons here with a mouse over feature. If I double click on one here, you can see I have an over feature with the little plus sign for that one. Okay, and this one has a little minus sign in the overstate. What I'll point out here is each one, of course, has an instance name. This one's add_btn. This one is subtract_btn. And the dynamic text box has a name of MyScore, capital S. Okay, it has to be a dynamic text box. We'll be referring to it in the code. So speaking of the code, let's take a look right now. So for this, you need to create one variable, and it's basically the scorekeeper. So I've called mine total score. So you declare a variable, var, I use the name total score, equals 0. So it always has a default of 0. And then the buttons, I basically went into my code snippets and added a mouse click event listener. So I highlighted the button, went to my snippets, added a mouse click, and then manually entered the following code. This first line is adding 1 to whatever the value of the current variable total score is. So it's total score equals total score plus 1. The equals again means a sign inside of the action script. So this takes the current value and adds 1 to the current value. And then to share that with the viewer, we display it inside of the dynamic text window. The dynamic text window is the name MyScore. And to have it render inside of the text box, we go .text. And then we say equals the name of the variable total score. And it will actually display the value of this variable. Okay? And it's virtually the same for the subtract button. The only difference here is that we do a subtract code, and let me just show you here. It's quite subtle. Actually, I have a plus minus there. Let me just take that minus out and give it a quick test. It should be -1. So let me just do a test movie here. And it worked anyway, but I just, it was kind of sloppy code there. I must have just missed that when I first created it. However, the only thing that's different in the subtract button is total score equals total score -1. And again, we display that by calling up the name of the dynamic text box with a .text equals the name of the variable, which is total score, and it will display the value of whatever that variable contains. Just one more thing I want to add here is inside of the dynamic text box, I'm going to highlight the text. This is also very important when you're using dynamic text boxes. You should embed the font. So I've used the font here called Impact, and you should click on Embed. And I've already embedded it, but just click All and click OK. That guarantees that the font will display, because sometimes it will not display properly if you don't embed it. So let's just do one more test movie here. Okay, so plus, plus, minus, minus. And that's how it's built. So I'll very quickly build one from scratch here. So I'm going to start a new file. And I'm just going to go with the small standard size, double click that, and I'll do a save as immediately. And I'll just call it click underscore counter. Okay, save that. I'm just going to change my background color. I really don't, whoops, undo that. Accidentally clicked on that. Just change my stage color. I just don't like working on the pure white. Alright, so let's start by creating a dynamic text box. I'm just going to click and drag a box out here. And if it's not on dynamic, change it to dynamic. And I'm going to give it an instance name right away here. I'll just call it my score and hit my enter key. Alright, I'm going to save that. And I'm just going to drag it down here a bit. And I'm going to type in a 0. And I may very well change the color. It actually remembers the color that I used last, and I will retain that fill color, but it's right here if you want to set a color. And let me embed the font. So I am on Impact currently. Again, it remembered the last settings I used, but choose whatever font you want and then go and embed it. And in here I'm just going to select all. Click OK. Alright, so I no longer should have an issue with that. If I want to shrink my box here, I can, resize it and so on. And I think I'll leave it centered. You can change the justification here, the alignment in paragraphs. Alright, so I'm good with that. That's my dynamic text box. Again, let me save here. I'll create a couple of very quick buttons. Just going to go to my oval tool. And I have a stroke of black and a fill of blue. Let's just change that to a green. And I'll quickly draw a circle. I'm holding my shift key down to constrain, and I'll just draw a couple of buttons. Roughly that size. I'm going to double click it. I do want to change the stroke weight. Okay, and I'll turn that into a button. We go convert to symbol. Button, I'll call it plus. And click OK. Alright, I'm going to go into that button by double clicking and just create an overstate for it. So I'll go over to the overstate and keyframe that. That's F6, which is the shortcut on the keyboard. Highlight it on the stage and change its fill color. Let's see here. Let's just make it maybe I'll just go with the yellow, I think. Okay, so in its normal state it's green, and when I mouse over it, it will turn yellow. And I might as well give that one an instance name as well. I'll call it plus underscore BTN. Hit my enter key. So I'm going to make a second one now, but I want it to be the same size as this. So I'm actually going to duplicate it in my library. So let's go over to the library. And there's my plus button. I'm just going to right click, duplicate, and I'll call it minus. Make sure it's a button. Click OK. And I'll drag that out to the stage. Now it's going to look the same, so I'm going to go into it by double clicking it and changing these colors around. Double click in it here, and then in the upstate I'm going to change that color to red. So I will go back to properties, change my fill color to the red, and I'll leave the overstate as a yellow. Okay, again we'll save that. And I'm just going to align them. I'm going to shift click on both. Modify, align. Let's see here. Horizontal center. Oh, wrong one. I always pick the wrong one. Undo. And I'll try that again. It'll be vertical center. Modify, align, vertical center. There we go. You'd think I'd know the difference. Alright, so now those are underneath there. Let me save that again. And I'll just put some text underneath to indicate. Click counter, save, replace. So with my text tool, I'm going to change the color to black. I don't think 76 is the size. I'm going to go smaller here. I'll go to about 24 and I'll see how that is to start with. I'm just going to click add. let's see here. I don't want that to be dynamic. I want it to be static. And I can shrink the box a bit. And I'll just duplicate that on the stage by clicking my Option key on the Mac, Alt key on the PC. And I'll call this minus. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to set up a variable that's going to be the counter, kind of in the brain, if you will. And when I click this button, it's going to add to the value of that variable. And then I want to display the value of that variable in my dynamic text box. So here we go. Let's go into the code here. So I will create a new layer for the code. And I'll just highlight that frame. And we'll drop in some code. I'm going to declare a variable, so it's var. And I'm just going to call it my counter. Okay, and equals, I'll give it a value, equals 0. And we end these with a semicolon. Okay, so now I have a counter called my counter. So let me just collapse this and make sure I have instance names here. Oh, I don't have one for the red button. So I'll go to the minus button and I'll call it minus underscore btn. Hit my enter key. Again, I'm saving as I go. Okay, so what I want to happen here is when I click this, it increases the value of this by 1. So I'm going to go to my code snippets. As soon as it loads up here. And we are in ActionScript here. And I'm just going to use a event handler for mouse click events. So I forgot to rename this layer actions. Okay, so I'm going to click on the desired button and add a mouse click event. Double click it and it appears in that code. And I'm just going to replace this line of code here with the counter. So my counter equals, and the equals means a sign in the code language, equals my counter, and I'm really referring to the value of the counter, and plus 1, and end that with a semicolon. And to display it, I'll put it on a new line. We'll refer to the dynamic text box, and it is called my score. So I'll just go my score dot text equals my counter, and it'll display the value of my counter, not the word my counter. My counter is the container of the data, and I'll just end that with a semicolon. So that will add to it. Let's save that and we can actually test it. Save, and I'll do a quick test movie here. And the add should change this. And there we go. So we can do virtually the same thing, except we'll replace the plus sign with a minus sign. So let's initiate this by checking or clicking on the minus button. I'll open my snippets here, and I'll add a mouse click event. And I'm just going to copy all the code from the previous function. And just replace all of this in here. And the only thing I need to do is change this plus to a minus. Okay, I'll save that. And we'll test that. And if I didn't make any errors, it'll actually be done. So let's go to test movie. Okay, and add, minus, minus. There we go. A very simple counter. Let's say you're taking attendance and you want to count with clicks. This would work. Okay, so that's how you can make a very simple click counter.